why do women not pursue leadership and what holds them back? And I thought about that, and I really think it's themselves. There are oftentimes imposter syndrome is a big buzzword around the women's groups that I'm involved in. They don't see themselves as worthy of an opportunity. They're nervous. They just don't take that step, where men, I think, are more confident.
Okay, tell me if this sounds familiar. You're sitting in a meeting and everybody around the table seems more senior than you, more polished, more sure of themselves. And you've got something to say, but that little voice in your head goes, "Who am I to speak up here? I've been there." And so has my guest, Sheila LaMothe. She once sat in a room full of executives from GE and Ford, feeling, in her words, completely irrelevant. But she made herself a promise. She said to herself, "I am not leaving this room without saying something." Good for Sheila. Well, now fast forward. Sheila has now chaired the Women in Manufacturing Board. She founded Women in Finishing, and today she leads strategic initiatives at Chemical Coaters Association International. So you might be asking yourself, what really holds women back from stepping into leadership? Her answer might just surprise you. Here's Sheila. Hey, Sheila. Thank you so much for joining me today on the No Woman Left Behind podcast. How are you doing today?
Good today. Thank you for having me, Rosie. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about your journey in your career. Now, we connected because I know that you have served about 8 years on the board of Women in Manufacturing, and I know you were instrumental in kind of getting that whole thing started. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved with a board.
Okay, sure. So first of all, it's been a number of years since I've been on the board, since Women in Manufacturing has now been around for, they just celebrated their 15th year. I was lucky enough to get connected with Allison Graylis, who is the founder and executive director or president of WIM, and at a trade show, FabTech, which is a major manufacturing trade show in the fabrication, welding, and finishing space. She was introduced to me by a ad sales rep that I had when I worked at Trumpf, which is one of the leading manufacturers of fabricating equipment and industrial lasers. From there, I was invited to serve on kind of an advisory committee to help get what was an initiative under the Precision Metal Forming Association. So I was able to start off on that. And then from there, when they were ready to move forward, I was invited to serve on the inaugural.
Well, and the reason why I wanted to ask you like how you got connected is because those relationships that we build, right? They're so instrumental. And so you got connected to several people and you met Allison, whether it's trade shows, networking events, and you ended up being like an instrumental individual helping kind of mold and create that. But I do remember when you and I initially talked, you said that you were in like a room with a lot of the women in manufacturing attendees. And you were like, "Oh my gosh, I'm intimidated by these women." Talk to me a little bit about why you felt intimidated and paint a picture of us of what that looked like.
Sure. So absolutely. So the first meeting was with that advisory board, if you will, that initial group. And I sat in the room. I can still see it now. And it was a long time ago. And I looked around the room and they were very high level women from GE, from Ford, I think Toyota. And I was like, I am the marketing manager was my title at the time. And I felt so irrelevant compared to the other women in the room. And they were coming forth with great ideas and very eloquently speaking. And I just sat there listening, taking it all in, of course, but telling myself, okay, you cannot leave this room without saying something. And it took me nearly the entire day, but I was able to put together something, and I can't remember what it was, to be honest with you, but it was something that I felt contributed to the conversation of the meeting. And that was a huge step for me, I think, because one of the things that I kind of live by now is the importance of stepping out of your comfort zone and just making whatever minimal comment that was in that meeting really kind of set the stage for me to be able to move forward in that group and ultimately serve on the actual board of directors.
It's so interesting because things like that, I mean, I remember being at my desk thinking, okay, like, is anybody noticing my hard work? And it wasn't until I actually went and said, hey, you know what, I'm interested into, stepping into leadership. And then things started happening. But it's like those micro lessons that you kind of go through in your career, and you're like, oh my gosh, why didn't I do that earlier? And that's why I created the No Woman Left Behind podcast, because there's so many amazing women. And so when I was looking at all of the amazing women that are part of Women in Manufacturing, I was like, oh my gosh, these women have so many lessons to share with the audience, because a lot of these industries are very largely dominated by males. And so it is just so wonderful to be able to find women like you that are really instrumental, and you have so much knowledge and expertise to share. So obviously you said that you were in marketing. So tell me a little bit about what your career trajectory, did you start off from like college or school thinking that you were going to end up where you ended up now in your career?
God, no. I was a double major in Asian and Hispanic studies, if you can believe that. And out of college, I actually moved to Japan. I was an English teacher, and I really wanted to be involved with some sort of job at the UN, something or other. When I came back from Japan, it was a very tight job market. And I ended up working for a utility company in Connecticut, and they did a program to help with struggling businesses. At the time, they created this thing called the Business Response Center at Economic Development. And I worked for the gas company, and they donated me to that effort. And through there is where I really got connected with manufacturing. When I was working there, I saw they had an international division, and I said, that's where I want to end up somehow, some way. I got connected with a woman who was the manager in that group and weaseled my way in there after some time, gave me a lot of exposure to manufacturing, and then it just moved on from there. And so now I have like 35 years in manufacturing now, which is really hard to believe, and in a wide variety of aspects of manufacturing.
Now, obviously, manufacturing, like I said, it's largely male oriented or male dominated. Sheila, what are some of the things that you have noticed that men do in their careers that women don't generally do?
I think that they have more confidence in themselves. Like, one of the things you asked me is why, one of the questions you sent was, why do women not pursue leadership and what holds them back? And I thought about that, and I really think it's themselves. There are oftentimes imposter syndrome is a big buzzword around the women's groups that I'm involved in. They don't see themselves as worthy of an opportunity. They're nervous. They just don't take that step, where men, I think, are more confident in the manufacturing environment, maybe because there's more of them, or it's just the nature of our gender. I'm not sure. But one of the things that I think really helped me is I had a lot of allies who are men. And I think that that is extremely important for women in manufacturing. I mean, there's all types of allies or mentors or peers that help us out. But some of the biggest for me have been men. And the person that introduced me to Allison was a man that said, I think that Sheila would be of value here. And when they invited me to be on the board, I couldn't believe it. I was like, why would anyone ever want me to be on the board? But he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself.
Yeah. And I think that's so key. Like, I just had another conversation with a podcast guest, and it was the exact same thing. A manager recognized in her, hey, you know what? You don't want to be doing that job. You have all this potential. And one of the things that I think women often lack or don't do well is, like, you're an expert in something, but we don't own that expertise. It's like we don't believe in ourselves. And this is where you literally have to start saying, I am an expert in marketing, or I am an expert in career coaching, and really live into those words. Were there any kind of sayings or exercises or anything that you were kind of like mantras that you were like repeating to yourself when, when people are like, hey, Sheila, you can do this. And you're like, what, me? Like, so talk to me about that.
Whole list of them, actually.
Oh,
So
good.
a lot of them I didn't really realize until further in my career. And which is why, even though this is a bit out of my comfort zone, I want to do things like this because I want to help women who are younger than me, earlier in their careers, not have to wait decades to figure it out. Right.
Right.
So I remember being at a conference in Hartford through I think it was a Connecticut Business and Industry Association, and it was focused on women in business. And there was a presenter there, and she said, when opportunity presents itself, jump in. And I think about that one a lot because you may not think that it's something that you can do. But again, if somebody invited you to do it, they saw something in you. And okay, it might not be perfect, but ask for help if you need it. And what happens if it doesn't work out? You learned from it. If you don't jump in, if you don't step out of your comfort zone, you are never going to advance, professionally or personally. Doing things that might be something that you've always wanted to do, but you're afraid to do. I mean, you don't want to go super risky, but really saying, okay, that's an opportunity. There's something I'm really interested in. Not sure I'm going to pull it off, but I'm going to jump.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some of the lessons that maybe you have learned in your career, throughout your career, that maybe you didn't learn in school?
Just about everything. Well, I think that I started to learn about leadership and teamwork, which I believe go hand in hand. A leadership title doesn't make you a leader, right? It's a mindset. It's your actions. And I do believe strongly that those go hand in hand. And I was a competitive athlete since I was 8 years old. And I think that's where I really learned the first steps of leadership and teamwork. And I was a swimmer, and swimming is a team sport, but it's also an individual sport, right? And so things like having to swim events that you don't want to swim because it's better for the team. Being elected team captain in college and having early morning practices that nobody wants to go to them, trust me. But I went every time because I was a captain and my coach took the time to drive there in the morning, and I needed to set an example for my team. Why would anyone else go if the captain didn't go? Right? So the early stages, I would say athletics really helped me. But then also, as I was thinking and preparing for this, I think a lot of my leadership skills have come out of volunteer activities like Women in Manufacturing. I also raise guide dogs for the blind with my husband. That is something else that has become extremely important in my life. So I think that there's a lot that you don't necessarily do in school or every day in your job that help you develop those leadership skills and build your networks and that sort of thing. One of the things that I really learned, and this was very hard for me, I'm a type A Leo, and through and through there, ask anyone who knows me, and I'm extremely competitive. And when I worked at Trump, I had a wonderfully talented team, and we would work on ideas for marketing initiatives together, and I would come to the table with I thought was a great idea, and it was really hard for me to admit his idea was better than mine. And you have to be willing to do that. Take a step back and realize your idea may not always be the best one. Nobody is an expert at everything, so you have to surround yourself with talented people that they make your team better, and really it makes you look better. I'm terrible at math. I know it. So when I had an $8+ million budget, I aligned myself very closely with my controlling staff assignment, and he helped me so much, and I learned so much. But you have to recognize your weaknesses and, build that strong team around you.
Yeah, and like you said, just because you're in leadership doesn't make you a leader. Recognizing that, someone else's idea is better than yours, and being able to fully admit that and be like, no, you know what? Like, my idea is not as good as yours. Let's go with yours. It's interesting. Obviously, you're in marketing, and I hate commercials because they're literally, to me, they feel like a waste of time because the commercials are so dumb nowadays. There's so many commercials that I'm just like, how is like what you just did that like literally insults my intelligence because they're just so dumb. And so, but being able to recognize when an idea is good and be able to, flush it out through the team and asking for help, like you asked, your controller for help because you're not, great at math. Those are the things that a true leader really does. Can you think of another example where maybe you mentored somebody that was under you that was struggling and you were able to lead them on a better path?
I've been lucky that I've had a lot of really good people in my departments. But I think one thing that I would say, and it's not necessarily tied to a specific person, but I think that it's extremely important to not ignore or cover up mistakes or problems or issues. I've encouraged people that work for me, and I'm thinking about trade shows right now in particular. Nothing goes perfect at a trade show. It just doesn't. And when I worked at Trump, our booth was huge. And oftentimes the show coordinator would call me and there'd be a problem. And what I did was I would encourage them, okay, definitely call me, but come to me with a few potential solutions. Maybe we use one of them, maybe we don't, but you want them to think through how we might be able to resolve the issue. They're the one on site. They're the one that sees what our alternatives are. Bring those to me and we'll work it out. I think that's really important because it also positions you not as a complainer or, someone that just always brings the problems, but you bring in some solutions. And I think that makes you more visible. And it happened to me too. This is kind of a funny story. We had a customer magazine that had a pretty wide circulation in the fabricating space. And it's a beautiful magazine. We had a great issue and it was already at print. So pretty much done. And the PR and media representative came to me and she said, Sheila, we have a problem. And I looked at the cover and I still didn't see it. And the cover title of the issue was Nurturing Our Customers. We forgot the R. It said neutering our customers. Not spelled correctly, but still horrible, right? So I said, okay, let's go to our printer and see what options we have. And I had to bring that to our president and tell him, what we did. And everybody looked at it. It was just one of those things when you're too close to something, you just don't see it sometimes. And I brought the various options we had. He chose to reprint the entire issue. It didn't get in trouble. And it was a very expensive mistake. We didn't hide behind it. We didn't wait till it was too late. We got in front of it and managed that. And I think that's extremely important.
That is extremely important because, it's like, it's almost worse. The longer you let it go, the more you suffer that anxiety of like, oh my gosh, I have to tell my boss or whomever, about the problem. And I've always said, like, I was the first one as soon as I found out that I had a problem or that I made a mistake, I would like go straight into my manager's office at the time when I was an individual contributor. And I'm like, just so you know, this is what happened. I've already worked on the rectification, but I knew it was going to come back to her. So why bother trying to hide it or pretend that it didn't happen? They're going to find out anyway, right? So I think that's really, that's a good leader. When you have a mistake and you recognize it and then you go and say, tell your superiors, whatever, because they're going to find out anyway, right? So it's a lesson learned.
To create an environment where your team is willing to come to you and bring you that mistake, with some potential solutions so that you can rectify it sooner than later. That is a really good collaborative.
Yeah. And I think those are probably the best environments to be able to grow and to understand that, yes, okay, I need someone outside the department to look at this just to make sure that it's not, the same people looking, because you get blind to, something that you're so close to. Very, very interesting. Now, Sheila, obviously you had an amazing career. Are there any points in your career that you were like, oh my gosh, that one decision really helped me on my leadership path?
Joining the board of directors for women in manufacturing. It really, it really made a huge impact on me. It elevated visibility for me in the industry. I learned a ton. I knew nothing about being on a board. And when I was brought in as vice chair, which meant the next year I was going to have to be chair. Robert's rules, what in the world are those? I had no idea how to run a board meeting because the advisory group that I was on, it didn't have that structure, right? So there was a ton to learn there. And it was a process, but it was also a supportive group that helped me. And then from there, I started the Connecticut chapter of WIM. We established Women in Manufacturing Education Foundation while I was there. And I just learned a lot and made so many connections and realized how much I enjoyed doing this sort of thing. And now I get paid for it because I work for Chemical Coaters Association International. I am their vice president of strategic initiatives. I started the Women in Finishing group here, really inspired by my experience with WIM. It's more focused on women in our industry. And also we established our own education foundation to help women in the industry, to help get more young people in the industry. We have a conference for women in the Women in Finishing Forum every year. This will be our 7th one this year. So it helped me not only with leadership, but discover a passion.
I really like that WIM was so instrumental. And like you said, I'm on the board of National Speakers Association, and it is a learning curve because you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? But it does take a year or two to kind of get your footing. And then, boy, once you actually are on a board and you have that collaboration with other people, where everybody kind of has the same goal of like pushing forward together, it really makes a big difference. So I love that you had such a great experience. And then you did the Connecticut chapter and you brought it into your corporation. So that has really been amazing. So Sheila, if there was a woman right now that was in your industry that was just kind of struggling with like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do in my career, what advice would you give to them? And you already said, get out of your comfort zone. Relationship building is a second one. But what else would you tell that woman in your industry when, again, it could be male dominated, where to go? What 1 or 2 steps could they start taking?
I think an undervalued resource are trade associations in general. So I work for a trade association, which, by the way, I was introduced to through my last role. So everything kind of rolled together for me.
Yeah.
But they offer so many training, education, networking. And in our case with CCAI, we have the Women in Finishing group. CCI manages the finishing pavilion at FabTech. That's where we started Women in Finishing with a little reception in our booth in 2017. And we thought 10, 15 women might come. Well, 35 came. And my boss and I looked at each other like, uh-oh. But that has really developed. I'm so thrilled with the way it has developed into a real community. So we have our forum every year. It's a 2-day professional development industry conference, but the community that it has built and the connections it has made for the women who have pursued or and want to stay in finishing is really remarkable. We have, just like women in manufacturing, whether you're on the shop floor or CEO, everybody is welcome. People have created their own little mentorships through there. It's so great at the conference every year to see how engaged the women are, especially the first timers. And we have a huge first time percentage. This past year, which was our sixth one, we had 47% first timers. The finishing industry is not huge. So, to me, it still blows my mind that we're attracting that many new people. So whether it's your industry association or CCI has local chapters, has 1 million chapters, look into those opportunities and take advantage of them. Memberships are typically, especially an individual membership, typically low, $100, somewhere around that. Usually gives you discounts on training opportunities and conferences and such. It's really, really worthwhile. And I would say a place where I have grown most through my connections through WIM, through CCAI, through other trade associations I've been involved with. So that's a first and easy step.
Gosh, I like that. Now, it's so interesting because a lot of times we say, well, you have to network, you have to network. And I've really started kind of stepping away from that networking word and using relationship building, because everything, pretty much every stepping stone of your career was because you were either introduced or you knew, there was a connection or some kind of relationship that kind of led you to your next step. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And I was thinking about this too, especially with LinkedIn and platforms like that. A network isn't that you have 6,000 connections on LinkedIn. You want to establish a meaningful network with people that you actually know who they are.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. There's times that I often accept LinkedIn invitations from people I don't necessarily know, but they're connected with other people that I have strong connections with. If it's somebody who I don't really see a strong connection with, I might not accept it because it's more important to me to have that meaningful network. And those are the kinds of networks I think you build through relationships, through associations, through groups, through chambers of commerce, whatever it might be. And then through those people, you get connected with.
Yeah. Well, actually, you and I are having this conversation because I found you on the Women in Manufacturing Summit book, and then I sent you a LinkedIn connection. I said, "Hey, Sheila, I know that you were on the WIM board. I would love to have a conversation with you about what we're talking today." And you accepted. I was very intentional with my words. I was like, I wanted you to know that I found you on the WIM, Summit booklet,
Sure.
so that, you knew that we, kind of had something in common. And here we are having this conversation, because I reached out to you on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a powerful tool, but I totally agree with you that I am also guilty of accepting people in my network that I don't necessarily know, but I'm also very knowledgeable on who just wants to sell me stuff, not
100%.
to make a connection. And LinkedIn has, truth be told, like 90% of the connection requests that I have are virtual assistants or people trying to do marketing in different countries and stuff like that. So I try to be very intentional about who I do accept, just like you are. So I think that that's a great plan. But Sheila, you have given us so many different ideas and how you manage your career. Is there maybe one key thing that you would want to leave the audience with as far as what they can do to get out of that comfort zone? Because you said you really had to get out of your comfort zone. So is there anything else that you can share with them about doing that?
Well, that's the big one, right? I think that it's important to say that you're stronger than you think you are. And one thing I should have said before that is a weakness of women. Good God, don't apologize for speaking.
Yes.
Do not apologize because I'm sorry. I'd let you just say what you got to say. There's no need to. What did you do? You didn't do anything. No man apologizes for speaking in a meeting. You have to be strong and confident, and what you have to say and what you have to contribute is important. Maybe your idea isn't taken all the time, but you'll be recognized for having had the courage to get yourself out there. But putting yourself in an environment where you can connect with others. I can't speak or emphasize enough about the trade associations in getting involved with groups. But I also warn, if you have the opportunity to get in groups and are invited to something like to be on a committee or a board, don't just fill your resume with boards and committees. Do something, be committed to it, accept an invitation to something that I'm not going to have the time to fully commit myself to. And that's really important. And that also will help build your reputation and improve your visibility.
Yeah, and I know that you were involved with the board for about 8 years, with the WIM board, kind of all together for about 8 years. Again, I'm part of the National Speaker Association, the Illinois chapter board. And this is my second year, and I've already committed to be on it for like 2 or 3 more years after that. So you're right. It is a big commitment, and I would not do anybody any good if I try to serve on different boards at the same time, unless I'm a fractional board member, that would be a different thing. But Anyway, you have given us, again, great advice. I love how your career just kind of went from stepping stone to stepping stone based on the relationships and those connections that you built. And that's what really is important for women to realize and understand, that you can't rise in your career by yourself. You need to make those connections. You need to make those relationships. And that is so, so important. With that, Sheila, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me. You have a great day too.
Okay. Can we just sit with something Sheila said for a second? When they asked her to join the board, her first thought was, why would anyone want me? But the man who put her name forward, he saw something in her that she didn't see in herself. Come on, how many of us have actually been there? I know I have for sure. So here's the thing. If somebody has invited you to step up, to lead something, to take something on, that is evidence, my friend. They already see it. Stop waiting until you see it too. So what are you going to do this week? I highly recommend that you steal Sheila's promise. In your next meeting, do not leave that room without saying something. One comment. One question. That's it. That's how it starts. And if for whatever reason, putting your impact into words is hard for you, I've got something for you. Grab my free Impact Clarity tool. The link is in the show notes. So with that, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.